This week we are going to propagate different kinds of stems by layering, where we are taking a portion of the stem, most of the time that's still connected to the parent plant, and turning it into a propagule. So the first type of layering that we're going to do is called an air layer. An air layer is when you take a nice big long stem and you girdle a section of it. Girdling is when you cut off the conducting tissue, particularly the phloem. We're going to disrupt so that you're not getting sugars to go the whole way down to the body of the plant. You're only getting sugars in the tip of this plant, and then you are still getting water up through the xylem. And the idea is that we're going to form roots on this plant part and have this entire top plant be a whole thing that you can take away from it. So it's going to end up looking like a big giant wrapped piece of candy. And we use black plastic for this. I've seen where some people use clear plastic or aluminum foil. I've had the most success with black plastic because it attracts the sunlight, and so it keeps this propagule warm on the inside and gives it favorable conditions for rooting. Whenever you're making your label to go on an air layer, you always want it to go on the part that's going to go with the propagule. So put it above your air layer and not below your air layer. The next propagation method that we're going to do is called a simple layer, and for the simple layer we are going to use a blackberry. So a simple layer is when you have this parent plant that's kind of just all out and sprawling like this, and you take a chunk of that stem with a node, you wound it by cracking it or nicking it with a knife, and then you either lay this on top of the soil, that's just a regular layer, or you can bury it in a trench, that's technically called trench layering, and then you're going to pin it into place using some sort of object so that it stays in contact with the soil and forms roots out of those nodes where it's touching the soil. This is a natural way of blackberries to propagate themselves, and so we're just going to utilize its evolutionarily successful strategy on how it propagates itself. The next method of layering that we're going to do is going to be done with the spider plant. And with the spider plant, what it does is it forms these really long stems, and on the tips of them and sometimes throughout the middles you will see little propagules that it's made of itself, and those are clones of the parent plant. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take these little clones off and we're going to pin them to the surface of some soil so that they can root and turn into new mother plants. Our next propagation method is going to be done with vine layering, and we're going to use the Pothos plant, which is a common household plant for this. With vine layers, you take one really long vine that you have, and you cut off a section of it, making sure that you don't retain that apical tip, and you just pin it to the surface of a pot, and then you allow those nodes to form roots at those locations. Very, very easy method, super easy to do at home. You guys are in for a treat this year because I actually ended up with some flower propagules on a plant that I have that's called Furcrea longeva. So the Furcrea is in the Agavaceae family, and it sends up this gigantic flower spike. And then after it flowers, all of those spots where the flowers were turn into little tiny propagules that you can pop right off and pin to the surface of the soil and form new plants. And then it takes another 4 to 6 years to complete its life cycle, and it sends up a big huge flower spike and does the same thing all over again. So there you have it. Chalk talk on layering.